Hello everyone. In this video we are going to discuss about general features and attachments of the humerus. Now humerus is a typical long bone. It has got two ends, upper end and lower end, and intervening shaft. The shaft is having three borders and three surfaces. Regarding side determination, you can watch my separate video. So here I have right humerus with me, and let's just start with the general features and attachment of it. First is the upper end. The upper end is having a head which is globular, a neck which is constricted, a lesser tubercle which is a bony prominence which is facing from in front, you can see over here, and greater tubercle which is another bony prominence which is situated on lateral aspect, and in between these two there is intertubercular sulcus. So upper part of this intertubercular sulcus is included in upper end. So these many parts are there in upper end. Let's see individual parts. Now first comes the head, which is more than one third of a sphere, which is smooth. It is covered by articular cartilage. It is articular. It articulates with corresponding glenoidal cavity of scapula, which is again articular, which is covered by articular cartilage, and together these two will form glenohumeral articulation or shoulder joint. So when you compare both the articular surfaces, this is head of humerus and this is glenoidal cavity, you can easily make out that glenoidal cavity is less extensive and shallower as compared to the size of head of humerus, and this will help in increase in range of movement. You can see over here the head of humerus can easily rotate, can easily move in different directions. As I mentioned, the head is covered by articular cartilage or hyaline cartilage, which is thicker in the center, whereas it is thinner in the periphery. So when you see humerus from in front, you can easily make out that the head is directed upward and medially, you can see over here, whereas when you see it from above, you can clearly make out that it is not only directed upward and medially, but it is also directed slightly backward. Now to make it more easier to understand, what I have done is I have tied a pencil along the long axis of the lower end of the humerus, mimicking it as a long axis of the lower end, and if I put this pointer along the long axis of the head, you can clearly make out that the long axis of the head is twisted backward. Okay, it is not in line with the long axis of the lower end, but it is little bit twisted backward, so it is directed upward medially and slightly backward. Now the same thing has been explained in this diagram. What you can see is this is a superior view of right humerus, and the outline of upper and lower end are shown. So the outline of upper end is drawn with orange color and lower end with blue color. So what you can see is head of humerus, lesser tubercle, greater tubercle showing upper end, whereas medial epicondyle, outline of trochlea, capitulum, and lateral epicondyle of lower end. Now there are certain axes drawn. So when you draw an axis which is passing from tip of medial epicondyle to the tip of lateral epicondyle, then it is termed as axis through distal end, or it is also termed as interepicondylar line. Another axis is drawn which is termed as articular axis of head, which should pass through center of the head through greater tubercle. Now that is what we have seen, that there is a little bit posterior displacement of head of the humerus as compared to the long axis of the lower end or interepicondylar line. So there is formation of an angle between these two, and that is termed as angle of retroversion. Now over here another angle is shown, and that is termed as angle of humeral torsion. Now what is it? It is an angle between the articular axis of head and the perpendicular plane which is perpendicular to the axis which is passing from distal end, right? So an angle is formed between these two, which is termed as angle of humeral torsion. Now next is a muscular impression, which is termed as lesser tubercle or lesser tuberosity. The lesser means we have got another greater one. So the anterior bony prominence or muscular impression is termed as lesser tubercle or lesser tuberosity, which receives insertion of subscapularis muscle. The lateral margin of lesser tubercle is sharp and it is separated from greater tubercle by upper part of intertubercular sulcus. Now this part of intertubercular sulcus will provide attachment to transverse humeral ligament. The most lateral part of upper end is greater tubercle, which is separated from lesser tubercle by upper part of intertubercular sulcus. Now when you connect humerus with the scapula, you can clearly make out that the lateral convex prominent part of the greater tubercle projects beyond the acromion. This is acromion. So this is projecting greater tubercle, and this is responsible for rounded contour of the shoulder. Now in living, this portion is covered by deltoid, which is separated by subacromial bursa, which is deep to it. Now upper and posterior aspect of this greater tubercle present three flat muscular impressions. One over here you can see, if I bring it a bit closer, you can clearly make out. This is the first flat muscular impression. Over here will be second, and below to it over here will be third, but the bone is a bit broken over here, but the third one would be over here. So there are three flat impressions and three muscles are attached respectively from above downward, namely supraspinatus, infraspinatus and teres minor. So three flat impressions for three muscles. So if we consider attachment of subscapularis along the lesser tubercle and the three muscles attached to the greater tubercle, these four muscles, subscapularis, supraspinatus, infraspinatus and teres minor, together these four will form rotator cuff, and that increases stability and strength of the shoulder joint. Now the fourth bony landmark in upper end is neck. There are three types of necks: anatomical neck, surgical neck and morphological neck. The anatomical neck is a constriction situated just next to the head. So this is anatomical neck. You can clearly make out. Okay, all around there is a constriction. This is termed as anatomical neck. Now next is surgical neck, which is a constriction continuous with cylindrical shaft. So when the upper end continues with cylindrical shaft, at the junction there is a constriction, this portion. This is termed as surgical neck. Why it is termed as surgical neck? Because posteriorly it is related to axillary nerve, which is also termed as circumflex nerve, and as this portion is constricted, it is vulnerable for fracture during fall in outstretched hand. So that leads to damage of this axillary nerve, and secondarily the deltoid, which is supplied by axillary nerve, will get paralyzed. So that's why this is termed as surgical neck. Third is morphological neck, which is an imaginary line situated approximately 0.5 centimeter above the surgical neck. So somewhere over here the morphological neck is situated. Now what is morphological neck? It is nothing but presence of or line of presence of epiphyseal plate of hyaline cartilage, which is found in young humerus. So in adult humerus that has got fused, so we won't be able to see the morphological neck. But in case of young humerus, obviously over here along this line we will find epiphyseal plate of hyaline cartilage. So that is morphological neck. Now along the anatomical neck, it provides attachment to capsular ligament of shoulder joint with two exceptions. Number one is along the intertubercular sulcus, where we have discussed it is providing attachment to transverse humeral ligament. So instead of attaching to the bone, over here in this region the capsule is attached to the transverse humeral ligament, leaving a gap deep to it, and this gap will allow passage of tendon of long head of biceps along with its synovial sheath. Second exception is along the medial aspect. Instead of attaching to the anatomical neck, the capsule is attached 1 centimeter below to it along the surgical neck. So inferiorly the capsule is lax, and this will permit wide range of movement of humerus, specifically abduction. Next to the upper end is shaft. On cross section in upper half it is cylindrical, and in lower half the cross section is triangular. Being a typical long bone, it has got three borders and three surfaces, namely anterior, medial and lateral borders, and intervening anteromedial, anterolateral and posterior surfaces. Let's see individual borders and surfaces. First is anterior border, which extends from greater tubercle above to the line between radial fossa and coronoid fossa below, over here. So this is the extent of anterior border. Now along its commencement, it forms lateral margin of intertubercular sulcus. So this is the commencement of anterior border beyond greater tubercle. Okay, and along its course it limits the delta tuberosity, which we'll discuss later on. This is the delta tuberosity, which is situated along the anterolateral surface. So along its course it limits delta tuberosity, and in lower half it becomes more pronounced. You can clearly make out anterior border, and below, as we have discussed, it ends in between radial fossa and this coronoid fossa. Next is medial border, and you can recognize it from lower end. So in the lower end, this is medial epicondyle, and beyond medial epicondyle a sharp bony ridge commences. This is nothing but medial border. So it is better to identify medial and lateral borders from lower end. So this is medial border, and in the middle it forms a rough strip, small rough area you can see over here, and beyond that it is continuous as medial lip of intertubercular sulcus. So over here you can say that the medial border commences as medial lip of intertubercular sulcus in upper half, and then somewhere in the middle it forms a rough strip, and below it is continuous as sharp bony ridge, which is nothing but medial supracondylar ridge. So this sharp ridge is also termed as medial supracondylar ridge. Similarly, to identify lateral border, you can start from lateral epicondyle, and beyond that there forms a sharp bony ridge. You can see over here, this is lateral supracondylar ridge, which is nothing but part of lateral border of humerus. So beyond the tip of lateral epicondyle, this is lateral border. Initially it is lateral supracondylar ridge, and above it fades away in the middle portion along the line of spiral groove. Beyond that, it is continuous behind this posterior limb of deltoid tuberosity. This is deltoid tuberosity. It has V-shaped structure which is having anterior and posterior limb. So behind this posterior limb, the lateral border is continuous above, and it goes to end behind the greater tubercle, okay, along its posterior margin. So this is entirely lateral border, and as I said, you can identify it from below upward beyond lateral epicondyle. Now next is surfaces. As I mentioned, it has got three surfaces. So between this anterior border and medial border is anteromedial surface. Between anterior and lateral border is the anterolateral surface, and between medial and lateral borders posteriorly is the posterior surface. Now let's see first anteromedial surface. In upper one third, this anteromedial surface forms intertubercular sulcus. You can see over here. So as we have discussed, in upper part it is situated between the two tubercles, and below it is the anteromedial surface which forms this intertubercular sulcus. Now as we have discussed, this sulcus has got medial lip and lateral lip and a floor. So the medial lip receives insertion of teres major muscle, lateral lip receives insertion of bilaminar insertion of pectoralis major muscle, and in the floor there is insertion of latissimus dorsi. The groove itself lodges tendon of long head of biceps brachii along with its synovial sheath, which is coming from the joint, and from below one ascending branch goes inside, and that is a branch of anterior circumflex humerals. Now along the medial border in the middle part, as we have discussed, there is a rough strip. Now this rough strip receives insertion of coracobrachialis, and below to that, generally along the medial border, but over here in this case it is situated near the anterior border, there is a nutrient foramen. You can clearly see over here, and this is directed downward. Okay, so the upper end of humerus is growing end. Now lower half of anteromedial surface along with related anterior border and lower half of anterolateral surface, these three structures will provide origin to brachialis muscle. Now this medial supracondylar ridge will provide attachment to medial intermuscular septum, which will divide anterior and posterior compartment or flexor compartment in front and extensor compartment behind. Somewhere in the middle, this medial intermuscular septum is pierced by ulnar nerve and superior ulnar collateral artery. So from anterior compartment, the ulnar nerve along with the corresponding artery will enter into posterior compartment of arm. Now lower part of this medial supracondylar ridge, just in front of medial intermuscular septum over here, this portion provides origin to humeral head of pronator teres muscle. Sometimes along the anteromedial surface, approximately 5 cm above the medial epicondyle, somewhere over here, we may find a hook-like bony structure which is termed as supracondylar process. Now this supracondylar process is generally connected with the medial epicondyle by a fibrous band. This connecting fibrous band is termed as ligament of Schroeder's, which is phylogenetically a remnant of third head of coracobrachialis. Now this fibrous band may compress median nerve and brachial artery. Now next surface is anterolateral surface, which is situated between anterior border and lateral borders. Now in upper part, you can clearly see a V-shaped rough area. This is termed as deltoid tuberosity, which receives insertion of deltoid muscle. Now upper part of the anterolateral surface above to this deltoid tuberosity, this portion is covered by deltoid muscle, and deep to that deltoid muscle we may find an extension of subacromial bursa separating muscle and the bone. Now below to deltoid tuberosity, lower half of anterolateral surface provides origin to brachialis muscle that we have discussed along with the anterior border and corresponding anteromedial surface. Now the lateral supracondylar ridge, just in front of it, forms a narrow rough strip. So if I bring it closer, you can clearly make out there is a formation of narrow rough strip. See this. Now this will provide attachment to lateral intermuscular septum. So like medial intermuscular septum, which is attached to the medial supracondylar ridge, the similar septum over here will separate anterior and posterior compartment or flexor and extensor compartment, and in upper part the lateral intermuscular septum is pierced by radial nerve. So the radial nerve at this point will come in front from posterior to anterior compartment, and it is accompanied by anterior descending branch of profunda brachii artery, which will take part in formation of anastomosis around elbow. Now the same rough narrow strip in upper two-third will provide origin to brachioradialis, whereas in lower one-third this strip will provide origin to extensor carpi radialis longus muscle. Next is posterior surface, which is found between medial and lateral borders. So this is the posterior surface, which is interrupted by an obliquely running spiral groove or radial groove, which will be extending from medial border to lateral borders. It is very faint over here, but you can imagine a spirally running spiral groove or radial groove, which is directed from medial to lateral in spiral manner, extending from medial to lateral borders. This spiral groove is lodged in living by radial nerve and profunda brachii vessels. So somewhere over here will be the spiral groove, and its upper margin is bounded by an oblique ridge. You can see over here. This oblique ridge will provide attachment to lateral head of triceps. Now the posterior surface above to this oblique ridge in living is covered by deltoid muscle, as well as this surface is related to axillary nerve and posterior circumflex humeral vessels at the level of surgical neck of humerus. Rest of the posterior surface below spiral groove provides origin to fleshy medial head of triceps muscle. Next is lower end, which is expanded side to side, and it is broadly divided into articular and non-articular areas. The articular areas include capitulum and trochlea, whereas non-articular areas include radial fossa, coronoid fossa, olecranon fossa, medial epicondyle, and lateral epicondyle. Now let's see first capitulum, which is less than half of a sphere, which is articular in front and below, whereas posteriorly it is non-articular. The articular surface is covered by hyaline cartilage or articular cartilage, and it will articulate with superior articular surface of head of radius. See this is right radius, this is its disc-like head, and this is its superior articular surface. So both the capitulum and this articular surface will come in contact like this, and together they form part of elbow joint. So during extension, the inferior articular surface of capitulum will come in contact with the head, whereas during flexion, the anterior articular surface of the capitulum will come in contact. Okay, whereas posterior aspect of capitulum is non-articular. So this is how during flexion and extension, the capitulum and head of the radius will come in contact. Next is the trochlea, which is an asymmetrical pulley. It has got a medial flange and lateral flange. The medial flange is more extensive, you can see over here, which is approximately 6 mm below the level of lateral flange, and so as it is an asymmetrical pulley. Like capitulum, it has articular surfaces which is covered by articular cartilage. So it has got anterior, inferior, and posterior articular surfaces, and these articular surfaces will come in contact with the trochlear notch of ulna. Let me show you. So this is right ulna with its trochlear notch, and it has got two processes, coronoid process and olecranon process. In between these two there lies trochlear notch, and which will fix with this trochlea like this. Okay, so during extension, the posterior and inferior articular surfaces will come in contact with trochlear notch of ulna, whereas the same trochlear notch will come in contact with anterior articular surface of trochlea during flexion. Okay, so this is how it looks during flexion, and this is during extension. So all these three articular surfaces will come in contact with trochlear notch during various movements at elbow joint. Now, as I mentioned, the trochlea is asymmetrical and the medial margin is extensive. It is approximately 6 mm below the level of the lateral margin, and this will disturb the alignment of the humerus with the ulna, right? So when you articulate both, there is always formation of an angulation between these two, and this is termed as carrying angle. So when the forearm is extended and supinated, there is always formation of an angle between long axis of arm and long axis of forearm. That is termed as carrying angle, which is approximately 163 degree in adults, which opens laterally. The same angle disappears during pronation or flexion of the elbow. See this. Now in non-articular areas, as you know, there are three fossas and two epicondyles. So let's first see the radial fossa, which is situated just above to capitulum, and as it lodges anterior margin of head of radius, let me join both these together. The name given to it is radial fossa. So when we join both these together like this, see this, and when we do flexion, just the anterior margin of head of radius will be lodging inside radial fossa. See this. Now there is another fossa medial to it, just above to trochlea. This is termed as coronoid fossa, as it is lodging anterior margin of coronoid process of ulna. See, this is how they are joined together. And as I mentioned, as it is lodging anterior margin of coronoid process of ulna during full flexion, the name given to it as coronoid fossa. Say this, during flexion, the anterior margin of coronoid process is lodging inside. Okay, so this is how the articulation will take place. Now, posterior to it, there is another depression which is termed as olecranon fossa. Similarly, it is lodging olecranon process of the ulna during extended elbow. See this, when we do extension, okay, anterior margin of the olecranon process will be lodging inside the olecranon fossa of humerus. See this. And during flexion, the coronoid process will be lodging in coronoid fossa. During extension, the olecranon process will be lodging in the olecranon fossa. Now, remaining non-articular areas are medial and lateral epicondyles. Let's just see first medial epicondyle. So this is a blunt bony projection directed medially and slightly backward. See this. This is medial epicondyle, which is larger and more prominent as compared to the lateral epicondyle. The tip of medial epicondyle provides attachment to anterior and posterior bands of ulnar collateral ligament. Now, ulnar collateral ligament and radial collateral ligament are two strong collateral ligaments of elbow joint. Anteroinferior aspect of medial epicondyle bears an impression for common origin of superficial flexures of the forearm. This is also termed as common flexor origin, whereas posteriorly, the medial epicondyle bears a groove which lodges ulnar nerve. Now, at this place, ulnar nerve can be rolled, can be compressed, and that leads to a characteristic tingling sensations. Now, lateral epicondyle, which is comparatively less prominent projection and which is directed laterally and slightly forward. Its tip provides attachment to radial collateral ligament of elbow joint. Similar like medial epicondyle, anterolateral aspect of lateral epicondyle bears an impression which provides common origin of extensor muscles of forearm, superficial extensor muscle of forearm, which is also termed as common extensor origin. The posterior aspect of lateral epicondyle provides origin to anconeus muscle. Now, to understand attachment of capsular ligament of elbow joint, we have to draw a continuous line in front which should include capitulum, trochlea and these two fossa, radial and coronoid fossa, like this. We have to exclude both the epicondyles. Similarly, posteriorly, the line of attachment will be including posterior aspect of trochlea and olecranon fossa. Again, both the epicondyles are excluded. So this is regarding general features and attachments on the humerus. Hope you have understood well. Thanks for watching.